Are we going to get rid of these kids having to stay home if one person in the class tests positive?
Well, we have, as your reporter says, we are conducting trials of daily contact testing as a possible alternative to self-isolation. What matters also is that we keep the schools safe. And if you go around our schools, you will see a raft of measures to reduce the infection rates within schools. So there's extra hygiene, there's staggered breaks, we keep children in bubbles, and there's extra ventilation in classrooms to minimize the risk of transmission. There are about 3% of students who are self-isolating at the moment, and that's lower than it was in the autumn. And it tends to correlate with the number of infections in the community. But, you know, children are testing at home twice a week. It's very important that families continue to test their children twice a week so we can identify children who do have COVID and then they don't come into the school and spread that virus to other children.
So is that a yes?
No, we'll look at the results of the trial. And we'll make any decisions will be announced before we make a decision on step 4 going forward. But, you know, we have to do everything we can to minimize the risk of transmission of this virus. And that's why all those measures have been taken within schools to keep children and staff safe.
So we'll know by the 19th of July?
Yes, we will. And we've also written to schools yesterday asking them to prepare for 2 tests to take place on the school premises as a way of preparing for that when we come back in September. What we're also concerned about is having more children in school. We want children to be in school. That's why schools opened on the 8th of March. It's why we prioritise education. So the schools will be last to close, first to open as we deal with this dreadful virus and this pandemic, because we do know that children are better for their well-being, for their health, for their education by being in schools. And again, that's why we have the twice weekly testing, and it's why we have all the raft of control measures within the school premises to minimise the risk of transmission of the virus.
Yeah, it's not working though, is it? 93,000 young people have failed to return to full-time education after schools reopened their doors. What are you going to do about that?
Well, this is an issue that's always worried us. That's about 30,000 more than you see in a normal non-pandemic year. These are vulnerable children. We want them in school. When the lockdown occurred in March, we took extra measures to get schools to talk to the parents of those disengaged children who are not coming into school. Schools remained open, of course, if you remember, for vulnerable children and the children of critical workers. Where we weren't seeing those families sending their children into school, the school would contact the families. We would work with our regional teams at local authority level to talk to those families via social workers and so on, to help do everything we can to encourage those children to come into school.
Perhaps extending the school day by half an hour. Is that going to happen from September?
Well, catch up, of course, is very important. Even as early as June last year, the Prime Minister announced £1 billion of funding for catch up, for money to schools to spend as they felt appropriate to help children to catch up. Also, the National Tutoring Programme was introduced back in June last year. And we've earlier in June, we announced another 1.4 billion, bringing the total together with a February announcement up to over £3 billion of catch up. And that includes money also to help for teachers to be the best that they can through extra CPD and training, because we know that the best catch-up, of course, Kay, happens every day in school with children at school in those classrooms. But we're also conducting a review right now of the evidence about extending the school day and time spent in school to understand how that would work, how effective it would be if we were to increase the length of the school day.
OK, the other thing you're looking at is mobile-free school days. I mean, schools already have very robust policies in place when it comes to the use of mobiles. They know what they're doing, don't they?
A number of schools, an increasing number of schools, are banning mobile phones from the school day, keeping them out of the classrooms. They are a distraction. There is evidence that they improve attainment, particularly children, less academic children do better if they're not distracted by mobile phones. Countries like France banned mobile phones from schools 2 or 3 years ago. And I've always been in favour of banning mobile phones from the classroom. They also can affect children's mental health and their well-being if they're continually spending too much time on the screen. In our curriculum on relationship and health education, we ask teachers to teach children the importance of rationing the use of mobile phones, so they are spending time outside with friends, doing their homework, talking to their parents, and not always glued to their mobile phones. So yes, we do want to ban mobile phones from the classroom, but we are today launching a call for evidence to see how best to implement such a policy, and also other measures we want to take to ensure that we eliminate low-level disruption in our classroom, get rid of bullying in our classrooms. We want children to have a happy, safe time at school. And building on the work we've conducted over the last 10 years to give teachers more power, more control over the classroom. This is going a step further now to make sure that every classroom is safe and a happy place.
As you know, the teachers' unions have said that they already do that, so they're not quite sure why you're saying that this morning. Something else that you had said that pupils don't need from the 17th of May was masks in schools, and as a result, we've seen the number of kids that have tested positive going up and up and up. Will you look at that again come September? Will kids have to potentially wear masks when they go back to school?
Well, first of all, increasing numbers of children who are isolating, the 3% I mentioned earlier, is driven mainly by infection rates in the community. There's a correlation between the number of children who are asked to self-isolate because they've come into contact with somebody with COVID and the degree of infection in the community. We introduced face coverings for pupils in secondary school classrooms as a temporary measure. We reviewed that over Easter, and from May the 17th, it's no longer a recommendation. But of course, we do give discretion to directors of public health around the country, particularly in areas of high infection rates, to reintroduce or to maintain that recommendation in classrooms. And I think in about 60 local authorities in those high infection rates around the country, that there are recommendations to continue face coverings in classrooms. But it was a temporary measure. And as I said, the issue isn't about infections within the school. There are a huge raft of measures in place, so hygiene, ventilation, staggered breaks, and so on, to limit the risk of transmission in schools. This is about transmission in the community.
Will you be wearing a mask after the 19th of July, indoors?
Well, I wear a mask now when necessary, and
that's the law.
Yes, and I will. We'll see what is announced as we move to step 4.
Well, I spoke to several of your colleagues over the last couple of weeks, including George Eustace. He says he's not going to wear a mask after the 19th of July. And as you know, the Chancellor's also said the same. I just wondered what your view was.
My view is that I will adhere to whatever the guidance is that's announced leading up to step 4 of the roadmap.
So even if it's not a regulation that you need to wear a mask, you might still wear one?
I will wear whatever the recommendations are, the guidances to individuals about when and whether they should wear a face mask. We all have to do everything we can to minimise the risk of transmission, but we want the roadmap to be a one-way journey. We want it to be irreversible, and we will look at the data. And I'm optimistic, the way things are looking at the moment, that the 19th of July will be the step 4 of the roadmap.
OK. Have you seen the video of Chris Whitty? I'm sure you have, being assaulted by some yobs last night. What do you think should happen to them? And do you think that he should have some form of protection? Because he obviously is dividing opinion. This is the videos we're talking to you. What do you think?
I think this scene is absolutely appalling. And I'm sure all your viewers and the general public will absolutely condemn the behaviour of these jobs. Chris Whitty has done a fantastic job throughout the pandemic in advising the government of the necessary measures to keep our NHS safe, to save lives, and he has, been a very effective chief medical officer during that period. And those scenes should not have happened. This is now a matter of police investigation, and I hope the whole weight of the law will come down on people that engage in that kind of behaviour.
Should he be afforded some sort of close protection?
Well, that is a matter for the security services and for Chris Whitty. But those scenes should never have occurred in our society. Absolutely wrong. People, whatever role they have in government, should be able to walk on the street, walk through the park, unaccosted by that kind of behaviour. It should not happen in a free law-abiding society like ours.
Have you ever used a private email account for government business?
All business that I conduct goes through my private office. The Information Commissioner is clear that any key actions and decisions are recorded, and that's why all government action that I conduct takes place through my private office. How I communicate with my private office is through a range of measures, including mostly paper through the red box system.
So you've never used a private email account to carry out government business?
Well, I will talk to my private office through a range of measures, phone, text, email, but government business is conducted via the private office so that there is a record of all key actions and decisions that are taken. All government action, all government business takes place through that office.
How surprised are you that other ministers are not as fastidious as you when it comes to carrying out government business?
Well, I think all ministers do conduct business through their private office. It's how
private email accounts, as you know, Mr. Gibb.
I'm sorry?
Talking about private email accounts, as you know, and as we know, at least 2 ministers in the Department of Health have used their private email accounts.
Well, that's a matter for the Department of Health and to be
I'm asking you what your opinion is.
Well, the rules are very clear that all government action needs to take place through private offices, through formal channels, so that a record can be kept of those key decisions. And when there are people do, of course, have private conversations, and the key thing is that those private conversations are communicated to the private office so that they can then be, if necessary, recorded as part of the decision-making process.
Do you have a CCTV camera in your office?
Yes. No, I don't. I did ask the question, of course.
I bet you did. I bet you did. You saw Chris Bryant yesterday saying that Matt Hancock is the stupidest man on earth, snogging his mistress in front of a CCTV camera. It wasn't the smartest thing to do, was it?
Well, look, Matt Hancock has said that he breached the social distancing rules, and as a consequence, he felt that he had to resign, and that's what happened on Saturday. Matt Hancock has been, I think, a very good health secretary. He has managed this crisis, I think, the pandemic crisis, exemplarily, and we have kept the NHS safe. It hasn't been overwhelmed in that period, and we have one of the most successful vaccination rollouts in the world, with 85% of adults now having had at least 1 dose and 60% of adults having had 2 doses. So I would pay tribute to Matt. He took what he felt was the right decision to resign, and that decision was accepted by the Prime Minister.
He also employed his mistress at our expense.
Well, I'm a Education Minister. To be appointed a non-executive director, there is a process that's gone through with an appointment commissioner involved. And I'm sure that was the process that happened in the Department of Health, but I'm not close enough to all the details.
No, but she's his mistress and we were paying her.
Well, what you want from a non-executive director is their expertise and experience, and that's what will have been sought in the Department of Health. But again, I'm not close enough to the process to know all the details.
OK, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you.